Okay, now listen very carefully. What is a synapse? Synapse is basically a junction, a connection between two neurons. Now, in synapses के अंदर आपके पास होते हैं neurotransmitters as well. Neurons do not actually come into direct contact with each other, where the dendrites of the two neurons meet to make a connection between the neurons. That junction is known as a synapse, which is formed. At a synapse, there is a very small gap between neuron. That gap is known as synaptic cleft. And electrical impulses cannot travel directly from one neuron to the next due to the synaptic cleft. For example, जैसे electricity भी jump नहीं कर सकती. Hence, वो जो electric signal होता है वो gap में jump तो कर नहीं सकता. That electric signal is converted into a chemical signal which we call as the neurotransmitter. The chemical signaling molecules used to transfer the signal between neurons at a synapse are known as neurotransmitters. Once these neurotransmitters cross the synaptic cleft and meet the neuron on the opposite side, the signal is converted back into an electrical impulse which can then pass along the neuron. Now you have this neuron 1 and neuron 2. This is the part we call as the presynaptic membrane. And this is the part of the other neuron which we call as the postsynaptic membrane. ये बीच वाली जगह क्या है? This is your synaptic cleft. अब जो electrical signals आ रहे थे, they are converted into these small neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters are basically then carried over here और वो जाके इन receptor molecules के ऊपर stick हो जाते हैं, which are complementary to each of these neurotransmitters. The electrical impulse travels along the first axon of the neuron. Axon क्या होता है? ये जो basically neuron की एक शक्ल होती है ना, ये जो होती है, this is known as the axon part of a neuron. This triggers the end of the presynaptic neuron to release the chemical messages called neurotransmitters from vesicles, and these vesicles fuse with the presynaptic membrane, releasing their contents into the synaptic cleft. The neurotransmitters diffuse across the synaptic cleft and bind with the receptor molecules on the membrane of the second neuron, जिसको हम postsynaptic membrane कहते हैं. अब ये stimulate करेगा the second neuron to generate an electrical impulse. अब उसको chemical form में मिल गए थे, अब तो आगे कोई bridge नहीं, अब वो वापस उसको electrical impulse में transfer करके अपने axon के अंदर transfer कर देगा. The neurotransmitters are then destroyed to prevent continued stimulation of the second neuron. Otherwise, the neurotransmitters would cause repeated impulses to be sent. Synapses ensure that impulses only travel in one direction, avoiding the confusion that would be caused within the nervous system to travel in both directions. So what happens is basically an impulse arrives at the end of the presynaptic neuron, then the vesicles would move towards and fuse with the presynaptic membrane. यहाँ पे जाके वो fuse करते हैं. जैसे ही वो fuse करें, they would leave into the synaptic cleft and now they would diffuse across the synaptic cleft down the concentration gradient. ऊपर high concentration है, नीचे low concentration है. The neurotransmitters attach to the receptors that are present on the postsynaptic membrane. This triggers an impulse. और अब ये जब impulse यहाँ पे trigger होगी, अब वो वापस अपने आप को electrical transmitters में convert कर सकते हैं. The neurotransmitters are then recycled or destroyed once an impulse is sent. Now we'll discuss what is a simple reflex arc. Simple reflex arc क्या होता है? Receptor से CNS जाएगा, CNS से it's gonna be the affector. Receptor से CNS कैसे जाएगा? Through a sensory neuron. CNS से affector कैसे जाएगा? Motor neuron. इनको connect कौन करेगा? Relay neuron. For example, your finger can be a receiver, a receptor. जैसे एक candle एक गरम है. Action क्या होगा? You are going to lift your hand. अब इसके पीछे पूरी साइंस है. ये एरो देखो, ये यहाँ गया, ब्रेन में मैसेज किया, इसने वापस अफेक्टर की तरफ भेजा कि हाथ हटाओ. A reflex response, also known as an involuntary response, does not involve the conscious part of the brain as the coordinator of the reaction. Awareness of a response having happened occurs after the response has been carried out. Responses are therefore automatic and rapid, and this minimizes the damage to the body and also aids survival. जैसे कि pain withdrawal, blinking, coughing, खांसना, ये सारे क्या हैं? Examples है reflex arc के, जो कि completely involuntary होता है, automatic सा हो जाता है एकदम से. समझ आ गई?
जी
So
सर।
a reflex arc is a pathway of a reflex response, specifically the pathway taken by electrical impulses as they travel along the neurons. A stimulus to the receptor, receptor to the sensory neuron to the interneuron, which we also call as the relay neuron. एंड वहां से वो मोटर में जाता है और मोटर से अफेक्टर में, जहां पे रिस्पॉन्स जनरेट हो जाता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल एक पेन है, द पेन विच इज अ स्टिमुलस डिटेक्टेड बाय द पेन प्रेशर टच रिसेप्टर इन द स्किन ऑफ द person's foot. The sensory neuron would send the electrical impulses to the spinal cord, and the electrical impulses pass to the relay neuron in the spinal cord part of the central nervous system. A relay neuron synapse with a motor neuron would connect sensory and motor. और मोटर वो इम्पल्स कैसे कहाँ कैरी कर जाएगा, मसल में. कि आपको पाँव पे पिन चुभी थी, अफेक्टर के थ्रू, उस मसल अफेक्टर के थ्रू आप क्या करोगे, यू आर गोइंग टू कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एंड पुल द फुट अप अवे फ्रॉम द शार्प ऑब्जेक्ट, दैट इज गोइंग टू बी योर रिस्पॉन्स. और ये सब कैसे होता है, इन अ फ्रैक्शन ऑफ अ सेकेंड, लेस देन 0.2 to 0.3 seconds as well. Now, there are three main types of neuron in a reflex arc. The sensory neurons carry impulses from the sense organs to the central nervous system. The relay neurons are found in the central nervous system brain के अंदर, which connect the sensory and motor neurons. And the motor neurons carry impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors that can be your muscles or the glands as well. Overall बहुत एक rough basic तरीन diagram का एक idea होना चाहिए आपको neuron के, otherwise it's not included.